Hola and welcome to a new episode of the Roofless Dog and Pony Show. My name is Julio Panicello and I am the Dream Alchemist at Roofless Painters, a free-range art school and gallery for creative nomads. Our next painting collection is featured in each episode, so you can learn what we will be painting and why. In addition to discussing the concept's origins and contemporary context, we explore the possibilities for visual representation on our work, using past paintings as inspiration. We cite stylistic and historical references. In many ways, our episodes are like our paintings, messy, unpredictable, and unvarnished. All episodes can be found as video on Instagram and on our YouTube channel, and as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms. So you can listen while you walk or drive, tune out from the world, or you want to fall asleep. You're invited to contact us with any questions or remarks about this episode and to contribute your notes and comments to the presentation. So, we are going to show some paintings. If you're listening to this presentation on a podcast, we add the link on the description of the podcast. But before we bring up the first slide and we talk about the painting, we just want to say that this week we came across painting by a contemporary artist who lives and works in the UK, who we follow. His name is Ben Hope, and he is an observational process painter. So what he does, he paints things from life, whether he's outside or whether he's in his studio. And we've been painting for a very long time, and we've been going outside and painting our garden for the past 15 months or 14 months. We've been finding objects around our home, our rooms, in our closets, in our kitchen, I don't know, different locations inside our homes. And when we saw this painting by this artist, we realized, wait a second, we painted so many things and we haven't painted this? How is this possible? It's amazing that in the history of roofless painters and before that, we haven't chosen this element or tools as subject for our paintings. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the actual painting. And it's a painting by Ben Hope. I think that's the name of the artist. Yeah, Ben Hope. And it's a painting of his paint tubes. So essentially, that's gonna be the premise for our work. We are going to choose or select or arrange and decide the composition of our own painting tools, and specifically our paint tubes, as the subject for our paintings. And for example, I mean, this just blew our minds, obviously, but you can see that the arrangement of the objects follows a very specific premise. The point of view from above, so that's also very interesting. We're going to talk about point of view. So it looks like he was actually looking down on a table or a flat surface, but notice that we can only see the corner. It's just right here, the corner of the table. And obviously we love his style of painting. It's not highly detailed. There is a harmony of on the palette, on the colors. There's it's very earthy. They feel like stones or rocks. There's an incredible transparency on the bottom left corner. Things are not layered with heavy paint all over the place. We also love the fact that there is variety in the tubes. So the tubes are not following patterns. They are not arranged in a repetitive way. In the chaos, though, there is rhythm. So some are disengaged, some are laying behind. So it is such a complex, sophisticated, and yet really simple subject or composition. Some are cropped, some are in full view. You cannot read any labels, but you know they are labeled. We love the restraint in detail. The fact we know that we guess that this was painted from life because the shadows have a lot of color, and usually when we take pictures, anything that's shaded becomes very gray and muted. So this was the inspiration for our next painting collection. We brought some examples because one of the reasons, or one of the things that we want to do with these presentations is give ourselves examples of how to tackle the same subject with different styles. So I'm just gonna go ahead and bring a couple more paintings. Let me see. Okay, so this is a painting by also a contemporary artist, Yakov Feldman, 2010. It's a single paint tube, a single one, and completely different than before. This is painted, and yes, we can argue that this has high realism, and we always talk about the differences between representation, figuration, and realism, and also throughout art history, the different ways that artists and movements have taken on representation or translation of the reality in front of them. So it is not a style of painting that we follow, I guess. It's not a style of painting that we strive for, because we encourage everyone to develop their own voice, visual voice, through practice and through research of the concept behind the paintings. But compositionally, this is also a very good example of an option to choose from for this next painting collection. Again, we're painting paint tubes that we have used. This is sort of like a self-portrait without us in inserting ourselves in the composition. An object that is extremely personal, an object that we use to create our pieces, the tool that allows us to represent. So I feel like this is a very intimate subject, and we're super puzzled that we haven't come up with this earlier in the past 15 months for sure, but also in past years, because it seems like a very traditional and classic subject. It was very difficult to do a search of paintings from the past of non-contemporary artists or non-living artists, because we're always interested in what our predecessors did decades ago or even centuries ago. Just because one of our favorite things is to time travel, and we love to look at work and put ourselves in the painter's shoes and see if we can connect with the same passion and emotion when they did the work. So doing a search through titles doesn't provide a lot of references from well-known painters or known painters from the past. So everything we found is work that has been done recently or by contemporary artists. But what's beautiful about this composition, going back to this painting, it's not just the paint tube that it's painted beautifully and rendered in a way that shows that this tube has been used many times. It's squeezed. There's a surface that is reflective. There is another surface that is stained and dirty. It's the background. And that's something that's similar to Ben Hope's painting. The background becomes a pictorial plane. And the stains, the remains of, perhaps this is a painting palette that has been scraped. So we can see the dry paint, the wood, even the remains or the footprint of a little bottle right below the image, my image, a little bottle. So it's a good way to talk about how we can introduce abstraction in a different pictorial plane. So there you go, another example of a composition of a paint tube. This time a single one in a very orderly, balanced composition with plenty of visual space around, a lot of movement, and yet with a very incredible focal point, which is the palette. So we are just gonna share. There are a lot of extremely cheesy ones, obviously, but we just curated a selection of paintings that are we find really vibrating in their strokes, in their composition. They really feel a little bit more outside of the predictable. So this is by Julian Merrow Smith. He's a painter who, I don't know if he currently lives there, but he is from the UK and he moved to the south of France. And what he does, he's been selected many times by the Royal Academy in the summer shows, and a couple of his portraits made it to the National Portrait Gallery. So he paints every day, and he does a painting a day, and one of the paintings was this tube, one of his tubes. And again, a single tube, a different point of view. So we went from two aerial bird's eye point of view. The previous painting had more of an aerial streak bird's eye, but this one is foreshortened. This the point of view, it's a little lower. So we're looking at this tube and we're looking at it from a lower point of view, so we see a little bit of the foreshortening of the tube. Compositionally, it's interesting that it feels a little bit off center. It's not cropped, but it just adds to the spontaneity. I don't know. I need to find out of the process. Painted very quickly, and we love the richness of the colors on the actual tube. So sometimes we complain that oil, when we paint a la prima and it's still wet, the colors get muddy because we layer colors and there's so much oil underneath the layers. And then we decide that it's time to stop and to let it dry, which is a good idea. And we encourage to take breaks and let the paint dry, and then just go back to it. But this is an excellent example of sometimes the muddy colors that you get when you stir so many pigments can get something extraordinarily powerful and aesthetically very interesting. And this is one of these examples. There is a green cast on this muddiness around it. There's no specific directional brushstroke around the tube, but the actual work on the tube, it's very messy. The strokes are quite big compared to the size of the tube. This is a small painting. I think it's 8 by 10. But it's not overworked. It's just it's like ikenaba, or the Japanese art of arranging flowers or arranging plants, that everything is strategically in place. So within this chaotic composition of brushstrokes, there is a perfect order. And yes, I'm using the word perfect. So this is one of our favorite examples, by the way, that single piece, because sometimes we feel like we have to paint a lot of things, but you can do a lot with one single tube, so consider that. And also the light direction, if you notice, all the highlights are concentrated in one area, but notice the cast shadow behind the tube, and it's colored, so we have no reason to believe that this was made or recreated off of a photograph. I think the artist was actually present and translating this from live. So another painting that we're going to show, this is by a contemporary artist from Los Angeles, John Kilduff. He does a lot of interesting things, but he did a series of paintings of his tubes, his paint tubes. And we brought it up because it's a different style. He is even more chaotic, and there's not a sense of this being perfectly studied. It's sort of like everything's mixed right here, very neutral. There's a very flat background. There's no interest in using that as a pictorial plane. Everything's concentrated on the tube, and the colors are very muted. There's nothing that pops, and we follow him. We love his style. He's completely careless, and he doesn't have any interest in being accurate proportion wise. So this is something that we wanted to bring in. Let me see if I have another example. There's another tube. This is another tube. I think I like this better than the one before, just because it's so dark gray, and I recognize the brand, but it doesn't even read like anything. So it's another example of how to select an item for the theme of the next painting collection, which is painting our own paint tubes. And I think we want to narrow it down to actual paint tubes, because there are plenty of exercises or examples with pots and brushes and turpentines and solvents, and so we're just going to keep it super tight. Paint our paint tubes, one of the most important elements in our own practice. So this, it's not the full painting, it's a little bit cropped, but that's okay. It's also by the same artist who is from the UK but moved permanently to the south of France, Julian Merrow Smith. A different paint tube with different light quality, still the same muddiness, but not as strokey on the background, and he kept the broken brush strokes on the actual tube. The beautiful contrast between the metallic surface versus the dirty label. So, and the color just concentrated on mostly on a part of the painting. So another example and another orientation. This is a good example of how to store properly an oil paint tube. We talked about the fact that paint tubes are meant to be stored upside down, so any oil that may not be fully blended with the pigment over time doesn't separate and come right when you open the tube. So when that happens, it's an indication of the paint not being extremely good quality, and also perhaps being the tube having been stored for a very long time in an upside down. This is actually not upside down, even though we have the labels and everything printed this way. The way you store a tube is upside down. This is how you store it, and ideally, if you can. We don't we move a lot, and we have everything in our paint box, and then things are just shifting all the time. But just because we paint on location and we go everywhere. But if you have a permanent spot and you don't move too much, so then you just put him upside down. But going back to the painting, yes, it's highly representational. We're not fans of this style just because we feel like it's more important to actually infuse the painting with your own style, so it doesn't become as predictable. We can argue, this is a different discussion, we can argue the value of representation, or accuracy rather, versus the importance of creating your own visual voice. But despite the fact that we're not fans of this highly representational style, and we have to be kind of like honest with ourselves, we do like the composition and the fact that this is also in a way balanced composition, a single tube, just because the bottom is balanced, but there is a growth on the almost finished tube that feels really it feels really, I was saying that it feels really a statuesque, so there's something sculpture-like about the tube, and that's another point of view. It's another point of view that you may choose as inspiration for your own composition. This will be a very important compositional series because paint tubes are paint tubes, but it seems simple and kind of like silly, but we can choose a composition that feels more unpredictable, or that allows us to be creative and make decisions that turn out to create a painting that feels more modern and less predictable. This painting is by an artist, Nigel Vogen Fletcher, I believe, contemporary artist. Style wise, I don't know, it's a little bit on the excess side. It's just a lot of texture and it's a lot of palette work, and it just feels a little bit strange. And but the compositionally, I think it's also interesting. One upside down tube, this one is upside down, and then the other two tubes without the cap, which is also very interesting, one on top of the other. So in a way, the reason perhaps we selected this image as an inspiration is it just feels like a bunch of like people just hanging out. There's an aspect of this composition that feels very anthropomorphic. It's just like someone standing up on a corner of a street, and then two figures embracing and kissing on the ground. But that's just us just going nuts with interpretation. But we like this anthropomorphic approach to a composition, and perhaps conceptually that's something that you may want to explore. Sort of like use the tubes as toys and then create a scene with those toys that perhaps has a narrative that it's not necessarily recognizable, but you may just want to reveal when you talk about the painting later. And I think that is all. I think that's all, except just gonna bring we talked about Wayne Thiebaud. Someone mentioned that they believe they did paintings of paint, and yes, we found series of work in which cans are featured. So that the question is, are these the materials that he uses for his paintings or not? So I don't know the answer to that, but it'd be interesting to find out, and we will find out tomorrow if the subject of the painting actually is the material that he uses to paint it. So this is the last example. We hope this was helpful. Again, we're going to paint our paint tubes. It's a form of self-portraiture. It's a very classic subject matter that we've never done. Please sign up on our website. There is a pre-registration link. We're going to send an email later today detailing the art statement for this series and adding this video as well. But you can go ahead and sign up. It's only $20. It's like a total of 3 hours. We do 2 hours of painting, 1 hour of critique and exchanging and sharing, which is really productive. And then if you register for tomorrow, you will get a bonus session on Tuesday in which we revisit the paintings and see if we added some work and what the direction of the painting's going. We have been featuring work for sale on our gallery, so know that what we love about what we do is that these are not simple exercises. We put a lot of work into them, and we open the online gallery for anyone who contributes to this collection, so they can actually feature the work there and put it up for sale. Things have been selling. We're really excited. So have that also. Consider that as well as a bonus on top of the bonus, that you can just feature your work on our website. We get a lot of visitors and a lot of good feedback. So I think that is all. Thanks so much. Perfect timing. And we haven't decided the title of this collection yet, but we will just do that later today. Maybe you can just comment on this video and let us know what you think we should call it. But Emily, Hania, thanks so much. And Ancient Futures 2012, if you're here, thanks for joining us. It's just I love how people just come up with names for their handles. Lois, we're excited. This is gonna be a super creative series, we think, because it's not going to be easy to choose the composition. It's not going to be easy to choose the point of view. It's not going to be easy to select how many tubes. So we spend a lot of time just thinking about this, and that's part of the painting process, by the way. So thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow, Friday. Bye.